Hi, welcome back. So this tutorial is going to show you how to set up a level design for your game. I want to try and keep this as general as possible. So I will kind of talk through ideas and how this could be changed depending on the game you're doing. But in this tutorial, we're going for very much a fixed size window with a fixed level within that window. There's going to be no scrolling or anything in this tutorial. You'd need to watch the next one to add that to it. Now, my starting point, I've got for a very basic level set up here. There's no characters, nothing else. It's very much the template version that just has a black screen and nothing else really there. In the settings, I've jumped ahead and created this level design. So the level design, we're going to use a Python list to hold it. And each row of the level is going to be a string. Each one of these X's is going to represent a block in our level. And you can see this. So this is the first row here. And when it ends, I've put a comma. And this is the second row, okay, all the way down until the close of the list at the bottom. Now, because this is all, we're aiming to have this design all displayed on one screen, and we want it to adjust depending on the screen size. It means I need to calculate the height and width of each of these tiles. So I'm going to use the set variables that we have here. So for the tile width, it's going to be 1200 pixels divided by the amount of space and tiles we've got here. Now, each one of these will count as one, but also each space also counts as one as well. So I'm going to divide it by the length of the level design, and I'm just going to take it as the first row. Now, this is under the assumption, and I guess it should always be the case, that each of these rows are going to be of equal length. If they differ, then this could cause problems, okay? But in terms of game design, I don't see why that should be the case. We're working with a set rectangle shape. Now, the tile height is 600 for mine, so it's going to be 600 divided by the length of the level design, and that will be just that. So basically what this is going to do is going to count the rows. So it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, again, these are fixed numbers, and if we do change these, it could be a problem. So I'm actually going to put these back to screen width and screen height. Okay, so those should be calculated okay. Now, we're going to need to create a new class, and this is going to be our class where we're going to hold all of our level design in. And put Pygame at the top, call it level, and we'll set up the constructor, although we might come back to this in a minute. We'll just put pass in here for the time being. So this is going to hold all of our tiles, which we're going to set up. And so we're also going to need another class, which we're going to call tile. Again, bring Pygame in and do the basic setup. The only difference with this one, similar, I'm just going to go and choose a previous project here. Oh no, not that one. This one here. Okay, so it's going to be similar to this. So we're going to need to inherit from our Pygame sprite, because this is going to be a graphic on the screen and we want the functionality that this provides. Once we've got that, we're going to have a constructor for when we build a tile, and we're probably going to need some information in here. I imagine we're going to need a position, because we're going to need to say where it's going to be drawn. Okay, after that, just like anytime we inherit from another class, the first thing we've got to do is call that super, okay, which calls the constructor in the parent. And that's always got to be the first thing that we do. After that, the actual code is going to be quite similar to the code that we did for the bullet if you followed that tutorial. So I'm going to take these here, and that's all I need, and put these in. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a surface. Now, this is based off the size of what the surface is going to be. It's not going to be this information here. So we're going to need to take the details that we calculated in our settings. So from the settings, I need access to the tile height and the tile width, and I'm going to use those here. We also need a color. So I've got a black background. I will use white in this example. Now, if you've gone through and you've done the more advanced kind of player setups, you could, instead of creating a rectangle, you could import an image instead and resize the image as we did in the other tutorials, and that would work fine for this one. Then we need to get our rectangle around it, so then we can use this to position the tile correctly. Right, from here, we will go back to the level, and we're going to run a new function called setup level. And what we do, once the level is created, we're going to call this function straight away. Now, this is going to need access to this design. So I need to bring that in. So from settings, we need to get access to the level design, and we're going to loop through this design. So I'm going to say for the row in level design, and then before we do anything else, let's just show that what we've got here, and just run where we are at the moment. Let's go back to the main level. Okay, so in the main level now, we're going to create a new level, and that will automatically then run this function, and we should see an output. We're going to need to import, in fact, sorry, from level file, import the level class. Okay, and let's see what happens when we run this. Okay, so you can see here, this is the output of the level, so it read it correctly, which is great. It means we've got access to it. So now, rather than printing this out, what we're going to do as we go through, this will be the row that we're accessing, and now we need to do another loop that's going to go through each one of these and draw them out as it loops through them. And then it will get to the end of that row, and it will move to the next row and draw each one of these out. Okay, so for row and level design, we now need to do for each column in the row. Okay. And then this column is going to be the one that is either going to give us an X in this case or a space back. So we can use an if statement then to check for that. If the column is equal to X, then it tells us that we need to draw a tile in this location. So we're going to say, right, tile equals a new tile. And again, we're going to need to import this. So we have access to it. Now, if you remember when we set up the tile, we said we had to give it a position. So at this point here, we've got to tell it where to draw. Now, we're going to do this based off of knowing which row and which column we're on. We know the height and width of the tile has already been created, so we need to now just work out exactly where the position of that is. And to do that, we need to know, as I say, the actual index of where we are in these. Looping this way doesn't give us access to that. So we really need to know the index row, and we need to know the index column. And the easiest way to do that is to now enumerate through the level design. Okay, and enumerate through the row as well. So in this case now, as it loops through this list, the index row will count from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and the row will actually give us the data. And then the same here. So to find the position of the tile and where to draw it on the screen, we've got to give an X and Y. So the first one we're going to say is the index column. And we're going to multiply this by the tile size. Now, I haven't got access to that at the moment, so I'm going to have to go back up here, import the level design, tile width, and tile height. So we're going to multiply the columns by the tile width and the row by the tile height. Okay, so to try and briefly explain what's going on here, if we imagine this is the first one, so it would do index column of 0 multiplied by the tile width, which will give us 0. So it means it's going to place it right against the left-hand wall. The row height, again, we're on row 0, so times height amount will give us 0, so it's going to place it in 0, 0. The next one, the index column is going to be 1 multiplied by the tile width. Let's say that's 64. That'll give us position X of 64. And the height will be 0 still because we're still on the same row. So it's going to draw it all along the top row, but it's slowly going to move across based on the tile width across the screen. So we've done that. Now we need to keep a collection of all of these tiles that we're building. So up in the constructor, we need to create a group. So we call it, in fact, self tiles equals a Pygame dot. There you go. I always have to go back and check these syntax checks as well. So if I go back to where I was doing my game character, and we had a set of bullets here, and we did something very similar in this one. Here we go. Pygame sprite group. So we're going to create another group here for the tiles, and every tile that we create, we add that to our tiles collection. Right, that looks okay there. Now, if we run this at the moment, it's not going to draw it to the screen just yet. We're creating lots of tiles, and these tiles are being put to the surface. Or they're being created as a surface, but they're not being drawn just yet. So we're also going to need a function that will basically draw out this each time. Oh, no. Maybe because I'm running the game. My PyCharm seems to have stopped responding. There we go. Okay, come back. So let's call it a run function. And inside of this, we're going to draw. Now, the one problem we have here is that we need to know where to draw them to. So when we run the level, we need to pass it the surface that we're going to draw them to, and we're going to use that here with the tiles. So back to our main level. We created the level here. After we filled the screen with black, we're now going to run this, and we're going to pass it the screen that we want to draw on. Just to point out, I've made a mistake here. I gave it a capital L, I shouldn't have. So I'm going to put that as a lowercase. That should remove that problem there. Okay. Right, let's give this a run and see what happens. Okay, so we got some tiles. From there, it looks like it hasn't calculated correctly. We've got a couple coming up and down, but certainly not got all the tiles I was expecting to see. So All I'm going to do quickly is pause. I'll try and debug what I've got, and then I'll come back and explain where we've gone wrong. Okay, so I've done a little bit of digging around and I've worked out what the problem was. And as usual with any programming problem, it's always something small and silly. So if you remember, when we go through and we create this tile and we gave it the place, the X and Y coordinate of where we wanted it to be drawn, this came here, but you can see at the moment it's actually gray, which is telling me that I haven't used this anywhere. So when we get the rectangle here, at this time, we should have set the top left position of this rectangle to the position we want it to be drawn. And that would have made a big difference. So if we run this, okay, so you can see the level's been completely drawn now. So if I go back to the settings and pull it up alongside it, so you can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 tiles across here. Then we've got a gap, then 2, then a gap, then 2 more, a gap, and then 1. So you can see this is matching the design we've got here. Because of the way we set it up, it's quite intuitive as well. So if I was to add a number of more rows, so a couple more with some design in as well, and then run this again, you can see everything auto adjusts, which is a really important thing to do, I think, when you're doing this. So because in our settings, we calculated the tile's height and width, rather than setting it to a fixed value, it allows us to create these levels, which we can guarantee will fit on whatever screen size we have. If I was to make my screen width smaller, it still runs and works, which is really useful. The only side is, I guess, if you are looking to have a scrolling game, if you were to scroll, for example, from left to right, what I'd recommend is in the settings, if you were going left to right, you would set the height. So the height you would calculate similarly like this, but the width you would have to a fixed width. And then if you were going from scrolling up from top to bottom or bottom to top, then you would do it the other way around. I will try and put together a little tutorial where you can develop this a little bit further and actually have scrolling levels rather than static ones as we've got here. But for a number of you, I think this will probably be as far as you need to go with your level design. Okay, I hope that helped.